Your soulmate needs to talk to you right now. Something serious happened, Red? Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because something has changed on their side in a way they never expected, and ever since it happened, their thoughts have been moving in one direction only, toward you. And listen to this, what makes this situation so intense is not just what happened, but the timing of it. Because there are moments in life when everything seems normal, when people believe they have more time, more opportunities, more chances to say what they really feel. Then suddenly, something happens that forces them to stop, reflect, and see everything differently. And your heart needs this right now because that is exactly the kind of moment they are experiencing. Something unexpected interrupted their routine, interrupted their assumptions, interrupted the story they had been telling themselves. And for the first time in a long time, they found themselves unable to ignore what has been sitting quietly in the background of their heart. And listen to this, they may have tried to push it away at first. They may have told themselves they were overthinking. They may have convinced themselves that what they were feeling would pass if they just focused on other things. But it didn't pass. It stayed. In fact, it became stronger. Because some feelings become louder when life reminds us how important certain people truly are. And your heart needs this right now because the more they reflected on everything, the more your presence stood out. Not just memories. Not just conversations. Not just moments. But the way you made them feel. The way they felt understood around you. The way your energy lingered in their mind long after interactions ended. And listen to this, that realization didn't arrive all at once. It happened gradually. One thought became another. One memory led to another. One question opened the door to many more. And before they knew it, they were sitting with emotions they had not fully allowed themselves to acknowledge before. Because sometimes people become so focused on avoiding vulnerability that they forget how much they actually care. And your heart needs this right now because what happened forced them to see beyond their defenses. It forced them to see what was real underneath everything else. And listen to this, there was a moment, a very specific moment, when everything became impossible to ignore. A moment when they stopped distracting themselves. A moment when they stopped searching for excuses. A moment when they simply sat with their thoughts and allowed the truth to speak for itself. And in that moment, your name, your presence, your energy became impossible to separate from what they were feeling. And your heart needs this right now because that was the beginning of a major emotional shift. Because once someone reaches that level of awareness, they cannot easily go back. They cannot pretend they never realized it. They cannot return to emotional distance without feeling the weight of what they now know. And listen to this, they are beginning to understand that silence has a cost. Every word left unsaid creates distance. Every feeling left hidden creates regret. Every opportunity ignored creates another question about what could have been. And your heart needs this right now because they are starting to feel the weight of those unanswered questions. They are beginning to wonder what would happen if they finally spoke honestly. What would happen if they stopped holding back? What would happen if they allowed themselves to express everything they have been carrying inside? And listen to this, that thought scares them. Not because they don't care, but because they do. Because when something matters, vulnerability becomes difficult. When someone matters, honesty feels risky. And yet, despite that fear, they continue moving closer to the same conclusion. The conclusion that they need to talk to you. That they need clarity. That they need to stop carrying these thoughts alone. And your heart needs this right now because the seriousness of the situation is not only about what happened externally. It is about the emotional awakening that followed. It is about the realization that some connections cannot simply be forgotten. Some feelings cannot be permanently buried. Some people leave an impact that remains no matter how much time passes. And listen to this, they are seeing that now more clearly than ever. They are realizing that certain emotions survive distance, survive silence, survive uncertainty. And that realization is changing the way they view everything. Because now they are no longer asking whether they should feel this way. They are asking what they should do about it. And your heart needs this right now because that question is powerful. It marks the moment when awareness begins turning into action. It marks the moment when reflection begins turning into intention. It marks the moment when silence begins losing its hold. And listen to this, even if nothing has happened yet on the surface, even if no conversation has taken place, even if everything still appears quiet from your perspective, something significant is already unfolding within them. Something that grows stronger each day. Something that continues demanding attention. Something that keeps leading them back to the same place. Back to the same thought. Back to the same feeling. Back to you. And this is only the beginning of what they are finally starting to understand. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because what happened after that realization did not simply fade away when the day ended. It stayed with them. It followed them into quiet moments, into late nights, into spaces where there was nothing left to distract them from what they were truly feeling. And listen to this, they thought time would help them sort everything out. They thought if they gave themselves enough space, enough distance, enough time to process, the intensity of what they were experiencing would settle down. But the opposite happened. The more time passed, the clearer everything became. And your heart needs this right now because clarity can be more powerful than emotion itself. Emotion can come and go, but clarity remains. Clarity forces people to face what they know deep inside. And that is exactly what is happening to them. They are no longer trying to understand whether this matters. They already know it does. Now they are trying to understand why it matters so much. And listen to this, every answer seems to bring them back to the same place. Back to the same memories. Back to the same conversations. Back to the same connection that never completely left their mind. They may find themselves replaying moments that once seemed ordinary. A simple exchange. A shared laugh. A brief conversation. Things that looked small at the time now feel much bigger because they are seeing them through a different perspective. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes people only recognize the value of something when life forces them to stop and truly look at it. What once felt familiar suddenly feels important. What once felt ordinary suddenly feels irreplaceable. And listen to this, they are beginning to realize that some feelings do not disappear simply because they are ignored. Some feelings grow stronger in silence. Some feelings wait patiently beneath the surface until the moment arrives when they can no longer be denied. And that moment is getting closer for them. Because every attempt to move past it only seems to bring them back to the same truth. Every effort to focus elsewhere eventually circles back to the same person. And your heart needs this right now because that person is you. Whether they expected it or not, whether they planned for it or not, your presence has become connected to something much deeper inside them. And listen to this, they may not even fully understand why they feel compelled to talk to you. They only know that the feeling continues growing. They only know that something remains unfinished. They only know that silence no longer feels like the right answer. And that realization can be overwhelming because it requires courage. It requires vulnerability. It requires stepping into uncertainty instead of avoiding it. And your heart needs this right now because they are standing directly in front of that choice. One path leads back to silence, back to distance, back to wondering what could have happened. The other path leads toward honesty, toward clarity, toward finally expressing what has remained hidden for far too long. And listen to this, they are beginning to understand that avoiding the conversation does not bring peace. It only delays it. The questions remain. The emotions remain. The connection remains. And because those things remain, the desire to speak continues growing stronger. They may find themselves imagining the conversation. Imagining what they would say. Imagining how they would explain everything they have been feeling. Imagining what it would be like to finally remove the weight they have been carrying. And your heart needs this right now because those thoughts are not random. They are preparation. They are the mind's way of moving someone closer to action. And every time they imagine that conversation, it becomes a little more real. Every time they think about reaching out, the distance between thought and action becomes a little smaller. And listen to this, what makes everything feel so urgent now is the awareness that life can change unexpectedly. The realization that tomorrow is never guaranteed to look exactly like today. The understanding that waiting forever is not actually an option. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes a serious moment does not just change circumstances, it changes priorities. It reveals what truly matters. It reveals who truly matters. And once that happens, it becomes very difficult to continue pretending otherwise. And listen to this, they are reaching a point where honesty feels less frightening than silence. Where truth feels less risky than regret. Where speaking feels easier than continuing to wonder. And that shift is important because it changes everything. It changes how they view the future. It changes how they view the connection. It changes how they view you. And your heart needs this right now because the conversation they feel pulled toward is no longer just an idea. It is becoming a necessity. Not because someone is forcing them. Not because circumstances demand it. But because their own heart is demanding it. Their own understanding is demanding it. Their own truth is demanding it. And listen to this. Even if you cannot see it yet, even if everything still appears quiet on the surface, something significant is happening beneath that silence. A decision is forming. A realization is deepening. A truth is becoming impossible to ignore. And with every passing day, they are moving closer to accepting that the only way forward is through honesty, through clarity, and through the conversation they have been avoiding for far too long. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because what has been happening inside them since that serious moment occurred has now reached a completely different stage. This is no longer just reflection. This is no longer just emotion. This is no longer just a passing wave of thoughts they hope will disappear with time. And listen to this, something has changed. Something has settled into place inside them. Because after all the thinking, all the questioning, all the attempts to understand what they are feeling, they have arrived at a truth they can no longer avoid. And your heart needs this right now because the truth they have discovered is not about circumstances. It is not about timing. It is not about external situations. It is about the connection itself. It is about realizing that no matter how much distance exists, no matter how much silence has passed, no matter how many distractions life places in front of them, there is still something unresolved in their heart whenever they think about you. And listen to this, they have tried to be logical about it. They have tried to analyze everything. They have tried to convince themselves that perhaps they were imagining things, perhaps they were making something bigger than it needed to be. But every attempt to explain it away only brought them back to the same conclusion. Every road led back to the same place. Every question led back to the same answer. And your heart needs this right now because they are beginning to understand that some connections are not meant to be solved through logic alone. Some things must be felt before they can be understood. And that realization has been changing them from the inside out. And listen to this. There have been moments recently when they suddenly stopped whatever they were doing because a memory crossed their mind. A memory that seemed insignificant before now carries emotional weight. A conversation they once overlooked now feels important. A moment they barely thought about before now feels meaningful. And your heart needs this right now because those memories are no longer random. They are becoming reminders. Reminders of what they felt. Reminders of what they experienced. Reminders of what they never fully allowed themselves to acknowledge. And listen to this, every reminder seems to strengthen the same feeling. The feeling that there is something they need to say. Something they need to express. Something they need to stop carrying alone. Because silence has started to feel heavier than honesty. And that is an important shift. Because when someone reaches that point, action becomes much more likely than avoidance. And your heart needs this right now because for a long time they believed they could simply keep moving forward without addressing these feelings. They believed time would eventually erase the questions. They believed distance would eventually weaken the connection. But instead, they discovered something unexpected. The connection remained. The questions remained. The emotions remained. And listen to this. That discovery has forced them to confront something they were not ready to face before. The possibility that what they feel is real enough to require action. The possibility that what they feel deserves honesty. The possibility that continuing to avoid the conversation will only create more regret later. And your heart needs this right now because regret has become something they think about more often than before. Not regret about mistakes necessarily, but regret about missed opportunities. Regret about words left unsaid. Regret about allowing fear to have too much influence over their decisions. And listen to this, they are beginning to realize that fear does not disappear by avoiding it. It only grows stronger. But honesty has the power to change everything. Honesty creates clarity. Honesty creates understanding. Honesty creates movement. And that is exactly why their thoughts keep returning to the same idea. The idea of finally talking to you. The idea of finally expressing what has been hidden. The idea of finally bringing truth into the open instead of leaving it trapped inside uncertainty. And your heart needs this right now because they are no longer running from that idea. They are moving toward it. Slowly. Carefully. Thoughtfully. But undeniably. And listen to this, they may still hesitate from time to time. They may still wonder how the conversation will go. They may still question whether the timing is right. They may still imagine different outcomes and different possibilities. But beneath all those questions, one thing remains constant. The desire to speak. The desire to connect. The desire to finally say what has remained unsaid. And your heart needs this right now because that desire is becoming stronger than the fears that once held them back. Stronger than the doubts. Stronger than the uncertainty. Stronger than the excuses they used to give themselves. And listen to this. The serious event that triggered all of this may have started the process, but it is no longer the center of the story. The center of the story is what it revealed. The center of the story is the truth it forced them to confront. The center of the story is the realization that some people leave a mark on your heart that cannot simply be ignored. And your heart needs this right now because they are beginning to understand that you are one of those people. Someone whose presence remained even during absence. Someone whose memory remained even during silence. Someone whose impact remained even when life continued moving forward. And listen to this, that understanding is changing everything. It is changing the way they see the past. It is changing the way they see the present. And most importantly, it is changing the way they see the future. Because for the first time in a long time, they are allowing themselves to imagine a future where honesty replaces silence, where clarity replaces uncertainty, and where the conversation they have been avoiding finally happens. And that realization is bringing them closer and closer to a decision they may not be able to postpone much longer. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because everything that has been happening inside them since that serious moment occurred has finally reached a turning point. And listen to this, they are no longer trying to figure out whether they should say something. That question has already been answered deep inside their heart. The real question now is when. When should they reach out? When should they stop carrying all of this alone? When should they finally allow the truth to replace the silence that has existed for far too long? And your heart needs this right now because there is a major difference between someone who is confused and someone who is preparing. Confusion keeps people stuck. Preparation moves people forward. And right now, they are preparing. Quietly. Carefully. Internally. They may not be showing it on the outside. They may not be making dramatic moves. They may not be revealing everything they feel. But beneath the surface, something important is happening. Their thoughts are becoming organized. Their emotions are becoming clearer. Their fears are becoming smaller. And the desire to communicate is becoming stronger than ever before. And listen to this, there was a time when they believed avoiding the conversation would protect them. They believed silence would keep everything safe. They believed distance would prevent disappointment. But now they are beginning to understand something powerful. Silence does not always protect people. Sometimes silence becomes its own kind of pain. Sometimes silence creates more questions than answers. Sometimes silence keeps two people trapped in uncertainty when clarity is exactly what both of them need. And your heart needs this right now because that realization has changed the way they see everything. They are beginning to understand that honesty may feel uncomfortable for a moment, but regret can last much longer. And listen to this, every day they wait, the same thoughts return. Every day they try to move on without addressing what they feel, the same emotions come back. Every day they convince themselves they can ignore it, something happens that reminds them why they cannot. A memory. A feeling. A moment of reflection. A sudden realization. And each reminder pushes them a little closer toward the same conclusion. The conclusion that they need to talk to you. Not someday. Not eventually. But soon. Because what they feel is no longer something they can easily dismiss. And your heart needs this right now because this is the stage where everything begins moving from internal awareness toward external action. The stage where feelings stop hiding in the background and start demanding attention. The stage where truth becomes impossible to keep locked away. And listen to this, they are imagining what that conversation might look like. They are imagining finally saying the things they never said before. They are imagining finally explaining everything they have been carrying inside. And while part of them still feels nervous, another part feels relieved. Relieved by the possibility of no longer carrying this emotional weight alone. Relieved by the possibility of finally being understood. Relieved by the possibility of replacing uncertainty with clarity. And your heart needs this right now because clarity is exactly where all of this is leading. The confusion is ending. The hesitation is weakening. The silence is losing its power. What remains is truth. What remains is understanding. What remains is the growing realization that some conversations cannot be delayed forever. And very soon, they may reach a point where speaking honestly feels easier than staying silent any longer. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because what has been building inside them is no longer just a feeling they can ignore, no longer just a realization they can push aside whenever life becomes busy, and no longer just a quiet thought that appears for a moment and disappears again. It has become something much deeper, something much more permanent, something that follows them wherever they go. And listen to this, the more they reflect on everything that happened, the more they understand that the serious event itself was never the true story. It was only the trigger. It was only the moment that forced them to stop, forced them to look inward, forced them to confront emotions they had been avoiding for far too long. And your heart needs this right now, because sometimes life creates a moment that changes everything, not because of what happens externally, but because of what it reveals internally. Suddenly, things that once seemed important lose their meaning. Priorities shift. Perspectives change. And people begin to see their lives through a completely different lens. And listen to this, that is exactly what has happened to them. They are no longer looking at the connection through the eyes of fear, doubt, or uncertainty. They are looking at it through the eyes of awareness. And awareness changes everything. Because once someone becomes aware of what truly matters to them, pretending otherwise becomes exhausting. Every attempt to ignore it feels unnatural. Every effort to move away from it feels forced. And your heart needs this right now, because they are beginning to realize that no matter how much time passes, no matter how many distractions appear, no matter how many other responsibilities fill their days, there is still something about you that remains present in their mind. Not because they are trying to think about you, but because your presence has become connected to something meaningful within them. And listen to this. There are moments now when they find themselves replaying memories they once overlooked. Conversations they barely thought about before now seem significant. Small details suddenly feel important. Things that once felt ordinary now carry emotional weight. And your heart needs this right now, because those memories are no longer just memories. They have become reminders. Reminders of how they felt. Reminders of what they experienced. Reminders of what they may have underestimated at the time. And every reminder brings them closer to the same realization. The realization that silence has not solved anything. The realization that distance has not erased anything. The realization that what they feel has remained stronger than they expected. And listen to this. They are beginning to imagine a future where honesty replaces uncertainty. A future where they no longer have to wonder what would happen if they spoke their truth. A future where they no longer carry unanswered questions inside their heart. And your heart needs this right now, because those thoughts are becoming more frequent. What was once an occasional idea has become a recurring possibility. What was once something they quickly dismissed now feels increasingly real. And that change is important, because it means they are no longer running from the conversation. They are moving toward it. Slowly. Carefully. Thoughtfully. But undeniably. And listen to this, there is still a part of them that feels nervous. A part of them that worries about outcomes they cannot control. A part of them that wonders how everything will unfold once the truth is finally spoken. But there is something stronger growing inside them now. Stronger than fear. Stronger than hesitation. Stronger than uncertainty. The desire for clarity. The desire for honesty. The desire to finally stop carrying everything alone. And your heart needs this right now, because that desire is beginning to outweigh every reason they once used to stay silent. Every excuse is losing strength. Every delay feels less convincing. Every attempt to ignore what they feel becomes harder to maintain. And listen to this, they are reaching a point where speaking honestly feels easier than continuing to stay silent. A point where expressing the truth feels less frightening than living with regret. A point where the need for understanding becomes stronger than the fear of vulnerability. And your heart needs this right now because that point changes everything. It marks the moment where reflection becomes intention. It marks the moment where awareness becomes action. It marks the moment where silence begins to lose its power completely. And even if nothing has happened yet on the surface, even if everything still appears quiet from your perspective, something significant is already taking shape within them. A decision is forming. A truth is becoming impossible to deny. A conversation is becoming impossible to avoid. And with every passing day, they are moving closer to the understanding that the only path forward is honesty, clarity, and finally saying the words they have carried inside for far too long. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because this is where everything finally begins to come together. Everything they have been feeling, everything they have been realizing, everything that has been quietly building inside them since that serious moment happened has now reached a point where it can no longer remain only a thought, only a feeling, only an internal struggle. And listen to this. They are no longer asking themselves whether this matters. They already know it does. They are no longer wondering whether they should pay attention to these emotions. They already are. What they are trying to understand now is how much longer they can continue carrying all of this without saying something. And your heart needs this right now because there comes a moment when silence stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like distance. There comes a moment when holding everything inside becomes heavier than speaking honestly. And that moment is getting closer for them every day. And listen to this, they have spent so much time reflecting, replaying memories, revisiting conversations, examining emotions they once tried to push aside. They have looked at the situation from every possible angle. They have questioned themselves. They have questioned their fears. They have questioned their reasons for staying silent. And through all of that reflection, one truth continues to remain. You still matter to them. The connection still matters to them. The things left unsaid still matter to them. And your heart needs this right now because that realization has changed the way they see the future. Instead of imagining more distance, they find themselves imagining understanding. Instead of imagining more silence, they find themselves imagining honesty. Instead of imagining what could go wrong, they are beginning to imagine what could happen if they finally stop holding back. And listen to this, that shift is powerful because it means fear is no longer leading the story. Fear may still be present, but it is no longer in control. What is beginning to take control is truth. Truth about what they feel. Truth about what they want. Truth about what they can no longer ignore. And your heart needs this right now because when truth becomes stronger than fear, people begin making different decisions. They begin choosing honesty over avoidance. They begin choosing clarity over confusion. They begin choosing action over endless hesitation. And listen to this, they are starting to understand that life does not always provide unlimited chances. Not every conversation can wait forever. Not every feeling can remain hidden forever. Not every opportunity returns after it is missed. And that awareness has made everything feel more urgent, more meaningful, more real. Because now they understand that some things deserve to be expressed while there is still time to express them. And your heart needs this right now because the conversation they feel pulled toward is no longer just an idea. It is becoming a necessity. Not because someone is forcing them. Not because circumstances demand it. But because their own heart is demanding it. Their own understanding is demanding it. Their own emotional truth is demanding it. And listen to this, even if they have not reached out yet, even if everything still seems quiet from where you stand, something important is already happening beneath that silence. A decision is forming. A wall is coming down. A truth is preparing to be spoken. And with every passing day, they are moving closer to a moment where staying silent feels impossible and speaking honestly feels like the only path left. Because after everything they have realized, after everything they have felt, after everything that serious moment revealed to them, they are beginning to understand that some conversations are not meant to be avoided forever, and some connections are not meant to remain unanswered.